What's up? My name is Eric Spivak. We are here once again with Blockster, and we have a new interview for you with Digital Shovel. Scott, I don't know if you'd like to introduce yourself and a little bit about Digital Shovel that we'll get into today. I'm excited to hear about, and I know the audience will be too. So yeah, if you could start, please just give us a brief introduction of who you are and what company you represent.
Awesome. Cool. Well, first of all, thanks for having us on the show. I'm the founder at Digital Shovel. We are a infrastructure developer and manufacturer for equipment for mining Bitcoin. We focus primarily on the infrastructure that holds the servers, and we do everything but the actual servers themselves. So we don't make any miners, but we do all the power distribution, ventilation, and most recently, over the last couple of years, we've moved into trying to make our data centers as autonomous and as efficient as possible, both from a deployment level, but also and miner management, but also energy management and how we can react to different trends and different pricing and actually helping the grid rather than being a burden to the grid.
Very cool. So conscious use and I guess having a little bit of an eco and environmentally mindful mindset. That's great. And then I guess with that, what inspired you to start doing this? What was the origin story of Digital Shovel for you?
So I got into mining, I'd say in 2016. I was sitting at a dinner with some people, and at the time, I actually thought Bitcoin and cryptocurrency was all a scam. I thought mining was hacking into people's wallets. Was very naive. I got very, very educated that evening by some pretty established guys in the community. Went home, bought a graphics card myself to try doing some mining, and realized that there was some substance to it. I enjoyed it. Converted a room in my condo, and at the time, that was through the rush through the start of 2017, where we kind of went from like 30s up to I think low 100s, 130, I think in February 2017. And then it shot up to 400 in July. So that was quite the run. A friend of mine and I had worked on it with him doing an industrial unit. And then I wanted to continue to replicate this, didn't have any room. So, okay, well, why don't I get a shipping container, cut that apart, make my own data center. We did that. And at the time, there was not a lot of guys in the space that were very hands-on in building that kind of stuff. I wanted to run a hosting business, but people kept coming to me and say, hey, you built this data center. Can you build one for me? And eventually we built one kind of reluctantly for somebody. And I realized, hey, this is a good market. It's a good space. It's ripe for some disruption. And that was the start of the business. We're still in the same place. We were actually just renting a tiny piece of parking space in the back lot here. This was actually supposed to be a cannabis grow op. The building was 120,000 square foot operation, but they didn't end up getting their license. And as we grew, they realized they had this vacant space and just keep leasing us more and more. And now we've pretty much taken over the whole building, and we've got a little over, I think 85,000 square feet and 70 full-time staff here.
That's amazing. Yeah, when I think about the use case of this type of I guess tech in a way, I do immediately go to hosting and servers and storage, and I think about domain providers and platforms like Wix and Squarespace and things of that nature, and just how much mass space that you need. Same thing with the cannabis industry, obviously, like to have the square footage to be able to effectively and efficiently do that. And then temperature control, safety and security, there's all these other compartments that are attached to and associated with this. So it's interesting and cool that it just like kind of grew and scaled from that small little intro to it. So I guess going more into the product of the mining machines, the M300 is something that you guys have been showcasing, and I wanted to know more about that and kind of see what makes that different from, the others that are on the market for people to find out about and discover.
Yeah, certainly. So we started originally doing conventional shipping containers, hacking them apart. Our goal originally, like you said, was density, try to get it into as small a space as possible. which, we developed and patented the V-shaped design, where you have, instead of just a big line of shelves, it's actually like a V of shelves with fans on one side and intakes on the other, to increase density. A little bit before COVID in 2019, we were starting to develop a product that was going to be specifically for stranded gas and dealing with stranded natural gas, where they didn't have the availability to put it on a pipeline and they couldn't necessarily get a big shipping container there. We made this miniature unit for them. I quickly kind of realized, hey, by building the entire container from scratch ourselves, we can really customize it. And instead of having to work around the container, we just now work around what we're trying to do, which is build a good data center and build every single panel specifically designed for what we actually want to do. It cut down dramatically on the amount of material and the cost to actually build a unit because of our manufacturing capabilities. But it really additionally cut down dramatically on logistics costs. You now don't need a 150-ton crane to lift a 40-foot shipping container, which sometimes in a rural area, you're going to pay 2-3 days cost to have a crane go there for one day, work for one day, then come back for the next day. Not to mention, the dance of trying to coordinate all those people. Sometimes the truck shows up a day late or shows up a day early. The units now can be picked up and moved with a forklift, and they're modular. So it's like Lego blocks. If you want to build 3 megawatts, you just take 10 of them and they all join together. And then once they're in the field, it looks like one large container. You wouldn't know any better unless I told you that it was actually separate pieces. So it really gives our clients flexibility in the logistics side. But same goes, we were talking before the interview there about having to move data centers. Sometimes you might start with a certain amount of power, but then, you have 3 megawatts and then for whatever reason, you only have 2.4 available at that site. You can now just take a couple blocks off and move them to another site, and you don't have that underutilized infrastructure that's sitting there not mining anymore. That would be on the logistics side of it. That would be one of our big advantages. The other is the smart automation we built. So originally our goal was density and try to fit as many miners into a small space as possible. We reached that barrier. You can only go so far. We actually backed up a little bit from that because we realized for our larger clients, guys building 5-10 megawatts plus, there's not as much space restraints. So we can get a little bit better cooling without being as dense. And then our next goal became, how do we make these as autonomous as possible? How do we make it so you don't require as many people to do your deployment, as many people to manage the miners? And the way we did that is by making the entire data center smart. So every single outlet can be controlled remotely, and not just remotely, but can be controlled by an automated watchdog. So you can program in rules that will automatically happen the same way, a miner goes down or starts working at half its capacity. Most of the time, you just need to unplug it, plug it back in, it works fine. The data center does that automatically. It's monitoring every single outlet. It knows how much it should be consuming, and when it's consuming slightly less, you can program a rule for it to turn the device on and off. And then if that doesn't work, then it sends a message to your tech saying, hey, you got to go take a look at this miner. And by doing that, it helps increase our clients' yield on their miners because they have a higher uptime and higher consistency in terms of hash rate.
That's very cool. So essentially you've optimized the process of efficiency to get the most out of the space, as well as not retrofitting your products to pre-existing shelves and containers, but just DIYing that part. So literal full control over every step of the process, so you can mitigate and offset risk and liability and additional costs and inefficiencies. That's really impressive.
Even further with a new version, actually, we're going to be premiering it at Mining Disrupt in a couple of weeks here at the end of July. The new unit, it's the same style of the mini pod, but it actually comes in pieces, so it bolts together. This came out of necessity for our overseas clients. We've been doing a lot of deployments in Africa to help with grid management, which is funny. You don't think of Africa as having excess power, but Bitcoin mining actually helps energy producers manage their grid a little bit by acting as a load when they need a load and then turning off when they don't. So we have a lot of sites in Africa where they have these microgrids. A company called Gridless that has a bunch of our pods. is putting them just onesie twosie here and there across Africa. And the logistics and shipping cost, even though the pods are still way easier than moving a shipping container, it still adds up. So now it all comes flat pack. You can now fit 11 of these in a 40-foot container instead of 3 when they're fully assembled. And then they just bolt them together in the field. And it's still the exact same pod. It just bolts together in the field rather than being fully welded in their shop.
That's really cool. So maximum flexibility and scalability, and also potentially helping the surrounding ecosystem or environment. I do see that Africa and India, there is a lot of interest in this, and I've been seeing those conversations pop up more and more. And I think it really comes down to space and competition in a way, and also resources and the availability to such. And obviously, like import export of a lot of this stuff is very difficult and expensive logistics wise. So I can imagine how, again, making these models more efficient and more compact, and you're I'm impressed. Um, so I guess with that said, like what, because you kind of went over what makes it different. You went over kind of the source and the origin of it. You went to kind of the benefits and perks to some extent. I want to go into that angle a little bit more, but I think before going into the benefits and perks, can you tell us a little more about the process of cryptocurrency mining for people that are potentially new to it and they wanted to explore this world? Like maybe how it's evolved, or how long you've been on this journey and on this ride with, watching the advancements of tech, and where we're at today, where we still don't have mass adoption for cryptocurrency, but every day you can find news around Bitcoin and Ethereum and blockchain and AI, AR, VR, XR, and more. So yeah, obviously, like this is adjacent, but also very much an underlining or underwriter to a lot of this stuff. So what could you give us like a little bird's eye view of what the process has been like for mining, and how it's evolved?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say the process in terms of mine, like for doing the actual mining hasn't changed dramatically, frankly, since I got into it. I mean, in 2016, there was still guys that were OGs at that point that had been doing it for some time. I mean, it's get a mining server, pick what coin you want to mine, depending on that. Everybody does pool mining now, which means, you're mining together to collectively try to solve the next block and then share the rewards off of that. Select your mining pool, get a wallet that your rewards are going to get distributed to, and then get a power source and ventilation for the heat that's going to be created on a very simplistic level. When I got into it, it was very, very realistic to be able to expect if you bought your equipment at a good price and you didn't really have to worry too much about your energy costs. The returns were so high back then that just everybody was making money, whether you were one miner at home or 1,000 miners in a shipping container. You've got to be there's a bit of luck, a bit of skill that comes into it in terms of selecting your machine to be able to do home mining right now. You definitely have to pay attention to your energy price. Where I am here in Toronto, Canada, we do run a data center here for R&D purposes, but it's very rare that makes money, even with the newest mining equipment. Every now and then we'll get a fluctuation in the difficulty, and then the Bitcoin price goes up and it's on your side. But for the most part, we're at 13-cent power here. You're not really making money at that price. Most of the small to medium players, we need to be at 7 to 8 cent power, give or take. Most of the industrial guys, and big industrial guys, they are low 4s or in the 3s. Some are lucky and even lower. I mean, I know some guys in Newfoundland and Labrador specifically in Canada, that they're below the 3s, but like very hard to find energy at those price points. But those are the price points you need to really be able to weather the storm. And that combined with purchasing your equipment in a down market, like purchasing your equipment when the returns are, to be frank, shit. Because when the returns are really high, you're one of those guys that are buying miners at 50, 60, $70 a terahash. when those same pieces of equipment right now are selling between $6 to $10 a terahash. And I'm just referring to the dollar rate per number of hashes you're able to do on that miner. They've gone down literally, 10 to 1. And everybody says, okay, well, is Bitcoin mining dead? The prices are down. We're not making money. I mean, we've gone through this cycle numerous times. And the guys that are buying and planning right now, while the market is slow, are the ones that are going to make the absolute max returns when we have our next bull market, and when the next, round of high quality equipment comes out.
Got it. Yeah.
I don't know if that was the correct answer to the question you were asking there. Went on a bit of a tangent.
No. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, obviously, like the environmental conditions and the cost of power in your region, if that fluctuates too much out of whack, you're dealing with almost 4 different forms of adversity from my understanding. It's, the market going rate for the region that you're in and the potential fluctuation of that. And then obviously like the actual environmental location of things, right? If there is a lot more effort, energy, and cost associated with protecting your units, right? And then you also have the world market and the commerce going and how many transactions per second are being done and where they're being done and on what chain and so on and so forth is Sam Bankman-Fried and like fucking shit up, to put it bluntly, or where are the issues and the pain points, and are people actually using this stuff? Then it makes sense to be mining right now. And then obviously on the other side, like, is the conversation still is it early, is it late, where are we at in the whole grand scheme of things? And I think at the end of the day, we're seeing like enterprise businesses and Fortune 100, Fortune 500s actually adopt cryptocurrency and all of this stuff right now. And we're seeing it at an exponential rate, and it's pretty quiet. It's not very bold and in your face, but you also have companies like Amazon waiting to roll out their marketplace with anybody that has an Amazon Prime account gets a wallet and is introduced to the world of digital currencies and assets. You have international countries that are focused heavily on the growth and development of this stuff. And obviously that can stimulate the usage and need for mining and miners, right? It might reduce the amount of fees if things become more accessible, but it sounds like accessibility comes at a cost, and that cost you are also trying to make as nominal as possible for consumers, right?
Yeah, and you touched on something earlier there, in terms of market rates and energy rates in a rural market, and that's something perhaps I should highlight a little bit, of another element that helps us differentiate. And we're certainly not the only ones that do this, but we try to build in as much optimization for our clients to be able to, especially if you're a medium scale miner that has the ability to buy energy based on the market rate or the price of the energy if you're in a market where the price does fluctuate per hour, which, New York, Texas, some of them every 15 minutes. And you can automate that process where it's taking a look at market rates for energy and turning off as those rates go up. And that does 2 things. One, it saves our clients money because they're able to make sure they're just buying power when it's cheap. But 2, it actually helps the electrical grid, because instead of you just being on and being a load, and when we get a really hot day and AC drives the energy price up and drives up demand, you're automatically turning off as that's happening. So you're actually kind of flattening that curve, which means the cost for the burden on the electrical grid is actually reduced. You're taking excess capacity, for instance, for hydroelectric or for wind or solar, where they're going to generate power no matter what. You're consuming what would otherwise be a completely underutilized asset. I mean, in Texas, some of these giant wind farms, they will often run negative rates, meaning they pay the grid to take their electricity because they're generating the power and they don't have anything to do with it, which means it's now they have less financial incentive to develop these green energy sources, because they're like, okay, well, I'm going to make money during X time, but this other time I'm actually going to lose money. And by putting Bitcoin mines in the right spaces, to consume that excess power so that they're no longer in a negative rate environment. They might not be making much money, but they're not going to now lose money to do that. It helps incentivize these projects. A lot of people, you always hear, oh, Bitcoin mining is so bad for the grid. Yeah, there's some guys that just stay on all the time, but the majority, I'm not going to say all, but the overwhelming majority of medium to large Bitcoin miners are all participating in curtailment programs, whether it be using a smart automation system that we have, whether you do it on a miner level. We do it at the outlet. So we physically just turn the miners on and off. And that whole process is automated. But it really is actually helping to benefit the electrical grid rather than be a burden on it.
No, you're kind of consistently going back to that conscious mindset of doing this. And I think that's super important, obviously, for the world at large, especially when, there's already so many negative stigmas around so many of these different pieces of technology that people don't understand the impacts that are beyond making money or, just looking at it from the socioeconomic or geopolitical side is like super important. The way that what you just said brings me to during the pandemic when everybody was on lockdown and nobody was traveling and all of this oil was still being produced and there was no storage for it and there was nobody to sell it. So where there's always a demand, there will always be supply. But when there's no demand, what happens to the supply? Does the supply chain stop? Does the storage get backed up? Does everything get reduced? So, I was getting stock shares at 15 to 30 cents in oil companies. And then as soon as the doors opened and travel was available again, you can imagine what happened. So I think about this as well from the standpoint of like what happens to the reserves of energy and what happens to, the biggest players in the space. Can they get more effective and efficient models that don't harm the environment nearly as much or at all, if they can reduce the carbon footprint at the same time as doing what they're meant to be doing? And it's almost a double-edged sword because it's also serving an industry that employs hundreds of thousands of people, and it also drives commerce and accelerates adoption of technology that can change the world forever. So there's a lot of moving parts that I think make it a really interesting discussion. And I can imagine these conversations that you're having around how people are processing and how they're running their businesses in this space is probably really, really exciting because you're on the forefront of a movement. So with that said, how have the regulatory challenges or legal considerations for miners been for you? How do you feel the general consensus is like dealing with constant, I guess, pressure, so to speak? What's like a form of adversity or obstruction that a lot of miners are facing right now?
Where to get me started? It's you think about the benefits that I just tried to highlight there, and you're getting the complete opposite out of a lot of communities where miners are being incredibly heavily discriminated against, and a lot of that is as a result of a few bad actors, going and not going through the proper permitting process and putting one of our data centers. And I tell guys all the time, like, look, if you can see a house, it's probably too close to put this data center unless you have some sound mitigation. And that's created a negative stigma. And there's been also a lot of guys that are a bit of the Wild West in terms of electrical safety standards and using stuff from overseas that don't comply with our standards or have fake certificates that say they're going to comply with the standards, but they really don't. Then they cause a fire, they cause injury. So there's been a bit of a knee-jerk reaction from a lot of the various regulatory bodies to try to stop Bitcoin mining because they take the examples of these bad actors and just paint everybody with the same brush. An example is a lot of states now have implemented restrictions for Bitcoin miners in terms of the decibels that they're allowed to emit. And that decibel level is half of what a regular data center can emit, which makes no sense. I mean, they're both data centers. They're both processing data. They both do the exact same thing. And there's been a variety of different things like that. We could have a whole interview just about that. I mean, we're happy to be sponsoring and working with the Satoshi Action Fund, which is the nonprofit that actually lobbies various levels of government for stuff like that. And they've been very what's the word, successful in a lot of those efforts, but there's a long way to go. And like I said, it's unfortunate that there was, you know, a few bad actors that have had some very public instances where either there's been injuries or they've disrupted a community, or, you know, they failed and, you know, and lost a pile of money for a pile of people. And that's the minority. But as often happens, you know, they paint the entire industry with that brush.
Completely understood. I mean, I think the destigmatization of a lot of this stuff is extremely necessary for advancement and growth, and it's really sad to see, because that prohibits and prevents innovation. And I think, like, I saw that firsthand over the last 3 years. You know, I was hosting early Bored Ape Yacht Club rooms and owning forest rooms and all these PFP projects. And as soon as celebrities and athletes and musicians and diplomats and everybody and their mother was trying to jump in and try to catch some of the windfall of the bull run, you know, ethics and morals and more went out the window. So you had a million poster childs of bad use cases and shady, poor decision, bad agencies, just, you know, turning a blind eye to the fact that they were hurting people financially and more. And, you know, I think in order to actually be a pioneer in this space at large, you have to be able to have the thick skin and have the conviction in the products and services that you're offering, and operate with integrity and character. And those attributes will go a very long way. I am very happy to see that while we still have a lot of work to do, that just means there's a lot of potential for opportunities to, you know, really change the narrative. And that's important for any industry that's rapidly growing. And this is one that never sleeps. So, and when you're talking about the sound and the decibel levels of these things, in my head, I'm just thinking about like the construction that goes on that blows up my place in downtown Los Angeles. But simultaneously, I used to have raves and warehouse parties shut down because of decibels and noise ordinance. And I'd be, you know, it's not apples to oranges. It's just a little bit of a difference in time. But, you know, do what you will, right? I guess talking future of things, I'd be curious of what some of your like predictions or insights to the direction of cryptocurrency mining is going, since, you know, obviously you're all in and very invested in it. So we understand that your perspective is not biased at all. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, how do you envision the space and the industry that you're in growing and scaling, considering we keep seeing this like hot potato flip-flop game of regulation and so on and so forth?
For mining as a whole, I mean, I think, you know, as we move into the next halving, I think we are going to see the traditional hole that we have coming out of every halving. I don't think it's going to be as radical as we had in previous years. In terms of the hot potato on the regulatory side, I mean, the right regulation is good. It gives, I mean, you compare now to, you know, when we got into this in 2018 and 2019. I mean, I founded the company officially in 2018. A lot of our clients, you know, they didn't know where they could bank. It was everything was completely either unbankable or uninsurable. And like, you didn't know how you were going to manage your custody solution or anything around that. So the regulatory environment that's come into a lot of that stuff has opened up the doors for a lot of more institutional investors to come in with more confidence. Like the standard things that you would look for in any big investment are in place now that weren't previously. So it's good. I mean, and again, pushing back to some of the lobby groups and some of the nonprofits that are helping to meet and educate the lawmakers on this product, because that's the biggest problem is a lot of the lawmakers are, what am I going to say, uneducated and unfamiliar with what exactly it is they're trying to regulate. Like they have an idea of it, but if they were to try to explain it to somebody that had no idea, they would not be able to whatsoever, right? They're going off of information and talking points that they got from their aides, which you can't be an expert on everything. But I think it's really important that we continue to spread the good word about stuff and educate not just lawmakers, but everybody on this to help create some stability and structure around it. Because like you said, we're still, although people have been mining for quite some time, this is still very much early days. I do think you're going to see more and more push to larger industrial projects and larger, I mean, it's not a level playing field whatsoever. I mean, the big miners or big mining equipment manufacturers just want to sell to big guys. Yes, they sell to the individuals, but their core business is selling to big institutional miners, and you are going to see more of that. But what's important is hopefully that we don't see a lot of centralization and we continue to keep stuff decentralized.
That makes sense. I mean, the bigger you go, the harder you fall.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think it's unfortunately not a matter of if but when for a lot of this, because it just takes more adoption at scale worldwide, and we already understand like that's just how things are going, especially when you have government agencies looking at introducing these types of technologies into their everyday systems that you know kids will be using in 10 years from now or 20 years from now. And I can understand how there are these new monopolies that are forming with these providers of service as well as the equipment. And as it becomes harder to get into, I think that's also where what you guys are offering, the digital shovel, I think is really novel, because you're making a part of an industry more accessible to your average Joe in a way, but you're removing the hardship and the time that it would take to effectively learn how to manage and maintain one of these mining rigs, and also providing the opportunity to scale it, all without having to be so hands-on and roll up sleeves and doing that work. So I really dig that. When when you talk about, I guess, the legal side of all of this, you're operating out of Canada. Have you found it to be more or less common that people are facing obstruction with doing any form of mining within the United States versus Canada, or are there places that you think scaling digital shovel into would be of your benefit and interest?
Um, I'd say it's. I mean, it's really on a state by state, province by province basis. There's definitely some states in the U.S. that it's far more difficult, if not impossible, to do mining. There's nowhere in Canada right now that's like that. Quebec has a bit of a moratorium on getting new mining contracts, but they're allowing existing to go on, and they keep flip-flopping back and forth. Again, like I said, yeah, it's more state by state basis thing. The majority of our clients are in the US. So like probably 95% of our product goes to the US. The balance stays here. It's just, I mean, it's an exponentially larger market. I mean, Texas alone has the size of almost the size of same size economy as all of Canada. Or at least on the oil and energy side, it certainly is. But yeah, I wouldn't say one over the other. Fortunately, when we manufacture stuff in Canada, it's under the USMCA, which is like the old NAFTA. So whether our clients bought it here, shipped it there, there's no tariffs or duties other than maybe $100 worth of paperwork when across the border. It's just the same as ordering it from the other side of the US for them.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. And then I guess I don't know if there's anything that you've not shared that I've not asked, but I would like to get into the cost associated with getting started, because we haven't gone there yet. And I feel like people watching and listening to this that might be interested would want to know, what does an entry point look like? And, how easy is that to get rolling?
Yeah, certainly. So with the stuff that we have right now that's on our site, a mini pod, you can put as many miners in it up to 88 as you want. You could put one in there if you wanted to. Just using simple round numbers for a mini pod, depending on your options, between 25 to 30 grand. That does take three-phase power, which is on usually an industrial hookup. Again, round numbers, relatively modern miner, whether it be a Bitmain S19 or the newer What's Miner units, you're between $1,000 to $1,500 per miner if you're buying that volume. Like I said, it takes up to 88 units. We are coming out now with, I'm not going to say residential level, but it would work on a residential level for guys between 10 to 20 miners. It's a much smaller unit. Those are going to be priced probably around 15 grand, and that will work off of conventional residential power. So so long as you've got a single phase 220, if you wanted to, you could put it in your backyard.
It's a lot more
It's also
accessible.
it's more accessible, and it's also being built specifically so that the way the heat is exhausted, it can be put into a duct for reusing the heat, which is often, especially for our smaller guys, that is a big request of theirs, to be able to use it to heat a greenhouse or heat their garage or heat a barn or something like that. And it's set up with 3 exhaust ports, and you could hook up a duct to one of them, and you can program it to turn off that one fan, but still just ventilate the other stuff outside. So it'll always ventilate the heat. Because our other units, I mean, you've got this big, it's almost 8 feet by 8 feet. Can't really hook a duct onto that. This is designed to allow our medium to small guys to be able to reuse that heat in a really efficient way, which can really help to offset the cost of getting started. So yeah,
That's amazing.
you buy 10 miners for, call it 10, 15 grand, buy the data center for 15 grand, you're into it for about 30 grand, call it another 2-3 grand in soft costs, you're $33,000, depending on the miner. So depending on when this comes out, call it $10 a day you're making on each one. You're making 120 bucks a day on each miner gross. I don't know what your energy cost is going to be,
Right.
which is a decent little chunk back.
It's not bad at all. And I like the opportunity to reroute the heat. I mean, obviously, if you're in a colder climate, where that is a really significant cost, that's a great way of mitigating a problem and providing, you know, a solution. And that's really cool. Do you find that the majority of your competitors are doing similar things to you, or do you feel like you're first to market with some of the ways that you're doing things? Is there what would you say makes you guys more unique or special?
Um, there are, I mean, there's one other
I know
company
that's kind of
that's
broad, so
no, it's fine. There's one other company that does that makes a smaller unit. I'm not going to give him a shout out, but we are friends. And he's a great guy and makes great product and does something similar where they have a variety of different sizes. In fact, he had a smaller unit before we did. But that's limited. Most other guys in the space, with the exception of our 2 companies, just use the uh, conventional container market. To my knowledge, and especially in North America that meet the certifications we do, there's nobody that's doing, complete vertical integration. We make our smart PDUs, all the automation we talked about. We build literally the PCBs. We fully assemble them in-house. We write the software in-house. We make the control boards for that in-house. Whereas pretty much all of our competitors, they buy those units from some other third party and then install them. Having that vertical integration really allows us to build a completely custom unit that is built for our use case. It's not using pieces from other stuff that, yes, it works, but I have to kind of work around their pieces. Every single piece in our data center is designed to work with the other pieces there in a completely cohesive manner.
I tell people not to build castles on other people's sand all the time. And it's the same thing with technology, right? You know, customizing a rig with a bunch of different parts put together that are manufactured by others versus doing it yourself, completely different game and completely different levels of proprietary usage. So when you get to
Well,
figure
it's
out,
also really hard to, I mean, it took us years and a lot of investment in machinery to get to this level. I mean, millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of machinery that we built and put into our facility, which, you know, that's a big bet. That's a big gamble. It's paid off for us, but it would take, yeah, it's a big risk for guys to do it, and understandably. I mean, there's not a whole pile of extra margin I make on doing the PDUs like that, but I think in the long run it makes our overall product a lot better, and that's where we make the extra margin to offset that.
yeah, yeah, I could see that. And I mean, it also provides a added layer of trust because again, you're never going to have to deal with or worry about, well, what if this company changes hands or goes under or whatever, and we've been solely relying on them our entire time. You know, that could get an operation. I know with when in the case of servers, I remember when there's a company called Verb, VIRB, and it was a tool. It was a business to help people create businesses. It was basically Squarespace, WordPress, Wix, and Verb, and they got bought out by Media Temple, and then got acquired by GoDaddy, and then got deleted. So people like myself that had 40, 50 different websites built on their platform, paying $10 a month, lost everything. There was no way to back up anything. And I literally had to rebuild almost 50 different websites years and years and years later. And I recently saw that the company Wix acquired DeviantArt, the oldest and largest collective of art and digital art in the world, because they weren't thinking ahead at the cost of storage and the cost of server space for hosting all of those images. And so Wix and their data centers and being able to support that, you know, that is a prime example of just watching a whole company face like, you got to make this decision and you got to make it fast or this whole thing's going to disappear tomorrow.
To
So
be
that's,
frank, if
yeah,
we had not gone the route we went in terms of doing as much as we do in house, and I'm also not a just in time guy. I like to keep inventory of the stuff we need, in not just waiting until we get an order. If we were not as vertically integrated as we were, COVID probably would have put us out of business. Just because
yeah,
you know, you would have like, I can't go to a customer and be like, yeah, you know what, I can build your product, but this one random piece I can't get for 9 months. So they just would not have ordered with us. And it very likely could have put us out of business if we weren't as vertically integrated and planned ahead in terms of having enough material and stuff on hand.
yeah, no, I can imagine. Just the lack of resources in general. That just was like a very rude awakening for a lot of businesses that thought they were unshakable during that 2020 to 2022 timeframe. So I guess I don't have any elephant in the room questions to ask you in regards to all of this because you know it's pretty straightforward if you think about kind of just pulling back a little bit and looking at it. But what would you say you're most excited about with, I guess, the future of mining or just the space at large?
I mean, again, it's not, I don't mean to like push or pump products here, but like we've been in the background and we haven't released it yet, but working on a power supply. So it's the conversion process from AC power to DC power. Pretty standard process, but there's been, and not just in Bitcoin mining, but in the industry at large, a move to use gallium nitride based semiconductors rather than silicon based because of their heat properties and a variety of other factors. And we're working to develop and use that same technology, or it's commonly referred to as GaN or GaN FETs, which often can result in anywhere from a 4 to 8% boost in efficiency. And that would apply to any miner. So being able to go and not just make them 4 to 8% more profitable on the energy side, but that's 4 to 8% less power that they're consuming from the electrical grid as a whole, which is great from the overall environment and the economy. That's something we've been working on for the last going on 2 years now. We're hoping, knock on wood, hoping to have that out to market in the next 3 to 6 months. And I would say that's definitely by far the most exciting thing we're working on, because once we finish that product, that's not just for our industry, that works for the regular data center market as well.
Yeah.
And again, this is not something that's proprietary that we invented. It's just taking technology from aerospace and from EV charging and using some of those same technologies and now bringing it down on a micro level and being able to use it on miners. So that is by far the most exciting thing I have on my roadmap right now.
I dig it. I often look at the criticism for the EV market, and me being based in Los Angeles, but formerly in New York, and seeing the differences between bike-only cities or bike-friendly cities, and how much people are in love with their cars. The energy consumption is crazy, and inflation does not make it any easier, and heat does not make it easier, and global warming and things of that nature. So I could see how that's an exciting road to go down. So I guess with all that said, I mean, we've kind of handled cost, we've looked at energy consumption, we've looked at regulation, and we've also talked about origin story to where you're at now to where you're going in the future. Is there anything that we've not covered that you want people to know about Digital Shovel before we sign off here?
Our team, our team is by far, like, our product is great. Our team, I joke with our HR guy, our mission statement is, build cool shit and build even cooler people. I'm really fortunate to have a wicked team we work with here. Our retention is awesome, and not only that, our first 3 employees are still within the company, and they've gone from entry-level techs to being supervisors, and it is awesome to have such a great team around us that are inspired and energized every single day by the product that we're building just as much as I am. And yeah, we certainly could not do it without them, and really lucky to have them on board.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with the team. And if you want to do both, like, that means taking care of the people, and the business runs itself. And so, that sounds like a beautiful thing, that you've got longevity and sustainability and sustained interest in the future of things. And I think that should be, seen as an intrinsic and inherent value with the company. I think that when you are building toward the unknown, which you very much are, right? It's not like, I guess the good part is, it's not like anyone can pull the plug, no pun intended, for the industry and cryptocurrency and Bitcoin space that you're touching and adjacent to and exposed to. But obviously with the how should I say, the negative press and narrative and more that get perpetuated and kicked around in all these different areas of the world, there's a lot of obstruction and a lot of adversity and things that you have to face, that you have to look past and beyond and let roll off your back as you continue to move forward. So I think it's great that you're that's I ask one thing you're excited about and you say the team. That's great. So yeah, I mean, I think I've covered just about everything that I want to. If there's any last words that you would like to drop, or anywhere you want people to follow you at or find you, we will have it in the description and in the links of everything. But outside of that, if there's any last words, sarcastic humor, words of wisdom, feel free to share that now. And we appreciate having you here.
Yeah, you can get us on everything. It's just at digital_shovel. So Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. The team will send you more of that because they manage some of that better than I do. Come on, Bitcoin 100K.
I feel it. Let's go. Yeah, well, it's been great having you here. I think you have a really impressive product, and it sounds like great history and ethics attached to it as well. So I'm wishing you nothing but success, and look forward to seeing you in the digital and physical landscapes of the space, pushing the technology forward and watching advancement grow and adoption continue to scale. So thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.